Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers Q&A. Today we're going to be covering the Lakers exit interview today with Redick and Rob Pelinka from this morning. I have 3 takeaways from the exit interview, which went on for about 30 minutes or so. I'm running on 4 hours of sleep, so speaking is going to be difficult for me today. Had a crazy day with the exit interview and getting this end of season story with The Athletic over the finish line, but wanted to hop on here and chat for about 45 minutes. So early morning gang, as White Falcon says. But yeah, wanted to go over 3 takeaways from the exit interview and then hop into the Q&A, go for about 45 minutes overall, and then call it a night because your boys is running on fumes here. The final like 24 to 48 hours after the end of the season is always a mad dash. Last night we were interviewing the players until past basically 12 o'clock, and then had exit interviews today at 10, and just been a wild 24 hours. But takeaway number 1 for me before we get into the Q&A is the Lakers still believe in this core. And it wasn't surprising because I've been saying that on here, said that last night. And I also don't know, I guess if they didn't believe in the core, I don't think they're going to come out and say that necessarily. But I think that they made it clear that whenever they were speaking about the future, about next season, they mentioned Luka, LeBron, and Austin, and that being the foundational trio. Rob Pelinka referred to them as the pillars of the organization. And I have a few quotes here from the exit interview that I wanted to touch on. So the first one this is from Rob on Austin, LeBron, and Luka together. He said, quote, "The level of confidence in Austin Reaves, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic is at an all-time high still, so no change in how we feel about those 3 guys. And in terms of assessing it, we lost the series, so we did not accomplish what we wanted to do, which was win in this series. But in every series, to me, it's like a game of chess. You learn, and then when you get to play the game the next time, you're better. But I think those 3 guys have incredible promise playing together, and we will collectively do a better job to make sure they're surrounded with the right pieces to have ultimate success." And we talked at the beginning what ultimate success is here, and we're going to put in the work to allow that group of guys to win a championship, end quote. So again, some of this could just be lip service, that there's always that element to some of these press conferences and whatnot, but I thought it was telling the way that they were cementing it as believing in those 3 as a trio and as a core. Rob talked about LeBron and LeBron's high expectations for the roster, and him being aware of LeBron's high expectations and knowing that they're going to have to make some changes and some improvements to the roster this summer. And then JJ talked about his partnership with Luka and about that first conversation that he's referenced before of when Luka first got traded to the Lakers, and they had that initial meeting the night he got to LA, talking about Luka wanting to be coached hard and that he still feels like they have more to unlock with that partnership and just pushing each other and getting Luka to the level of winning a championship. So I think from my big picture takeaway with that was just that I think the tentative plan moving forward is going to be building around those 3. And clearly, if those are your 3 best players and you're building around the strengths of those 3, you have shot creation, you have ball handling, you have playmaking, you have shooting. What you really need are athletes and size and defense and strength and physicality. You need a bunch of banshees, as JJ said at various points during the season. So I think when we look at like which guys check that box and which guys don't, that can inform what this roster will look like moving forward. But that was the first thing, is just continued belief in this core. And again, could end up being lip service if they go in a different direction with a couple of these guys or one of these guys at some point in the summer. But for now, they seem to be indicating that they believe in all three together as a trio. The second takeaway for me was the offseason goals. And so, of course, the biggest one is going to be extending Luka, locking him up long term. And I believe Rob used the term for the next decade with Luka. So he can't sign a decade-long contract, and he's still in a contract for another year. But clearly Luka and having him be the face of the organization, the face of the franchise for the foreseeable future is atop the Lakers offseason list. Number 2 is re-signing / keeping LeBron, whether he wants to opt out and re-sign or he wants to opt in to his $52.6 million player option. That is the next thing of the Lakers docket. Might be the biggest domino because Luka, whether he extends or not, there could be some benefits to potentially waiting and just seeing how the situation plays out next year. He's under contract next year regardless. LeBron is the one who holds some power here in terms of what he wants to do and having some flexibility there. Then in terms of actual roster additions, of course, a center is at the top of the list. Rob addressed the elephant in the room that the Lakers need a center, that they need more size. Multiple players touched on that last night, and it's clear that the Lakers need a starting caliber center, and there's really 2 ways to get that for them. It's either in free agency, where right now they project to be just under the first apron and have the taxpayer mid-level exception, which would be projected at about $5.7 million. So that's not that much in terms of adding a center for that price. Or they could trade for a guy, but if you trade for someone, you're potentially having to give up Rui or Austin or Vando or Gabe or Maxi Kleba or Dalton, and then you also have a pick. I misspoke last night. They have actually upwards of 5 pick swaps. I believe I said 1 or 2. So 5 pick swaps. So but I think that if they trade one of the first, that would obviously eliminate that pick swap. So I think technically it's like a 1 first and 4 pick swaps is like the most they can throw. But as I touched on around the trade deadline, the Lakers pick swaps are not valuable because, like, for example, their 2026 pick swap, theoretically, the 2026 version of the Lakers is going to be a really good team that wins 50 plus games. It has home court advantage in the West. That's going to be a late 20s first. So it's not completely worthless from an asset perspective. But the point of a pick swap is you are hoping that the team you are getting the swap from is worse than you and has a better pick than you. And most of the teams that the Lakers are probably going to be dealing with are going to be teams that are worse than them who will have better picks than them. So the pick swap doesn't have the same value as it would if the Lakers were a worse team. So that's one of the tricky things is once you are a good team, your pick swaps tend to be worth less because they might not actually materialize. But the Lakers need a starting caliber center. In terms of the actual traits, I asked Rob about that because at the top he mentioned a center. So I followed up and I said, what are you looking for specifically with a center? What traits, what characteristics do you want with a center? And then I followed up and said, what other skill sets or attributes are you looking for in terms of other needs? So he said for a center, they want a vertical lob threat. They want someone who can protect the rim. And they also would be interested potentially in a stretch big who could also protect the rim. That perked my ears up a bit at the possibility of like a Brook Lopez. Like that was the first name that popped into my head. Just thinking about there aren't many bigs who can stretch the floor and protect the rim. And there are some younger ones, but those guys are all on like rookie scale contracts and they're not going to be available. So in terms of potentially realistic guys, Brook Lopez was one of the first names that popped into my head when Rob was talking about that. And then the secondary need for them, according to Rob, is perimeter defense on the wings. And that he felt like that was something they needed more in this series. And just looking at the playoffs and the way that certain matchups play out, something that they need more of just in general. So I would agree. Those have been the two needs I've been talking about. They need another center. I think they need better two-way wing play. Could also use another athletic guard, but depending on the size of that player could maybe shift between like the 2 and the 3 or the 3 and the 4 or 2 through 4. I think positional versatility is really important in 2025. So agreed, at least for me, in terms of the needs that they are looking at. Now it's out, it's on them to go out and actually go get those players. And then third and final takeaway, and this is the one that I wrote a newser about for The Athletic, and I know this got some attention across social media and Lakers Twitter and whatnot. The championship shape, we'll call it. So JJ had a quote about the Lakers needing to get in championship shape for next season. And I think there is some legitimacy to that, because if you look at the fourth quarters, the Lakers were outscored in all 5 fourth quarters in this series. I believe the final margin was 127 to 85, which is, so they were outscored by 42 points across 5 fourth quarters. So on average, they were getting outscored by 8 points per game in these fourth quarters. And that's, a lot of it was just like comparing like stamina and conditioning between the Lakers and between the Wolves. The Wolves always had more juice in the fourth quarter. And I think part of it was the depth for sure, but it's not like the Wolves are going with like 11 guys. The Wolves are still playing 8 guys. The Lakers, game 5, they played 7.5 guys. Like for most of the series, they were playing 7 to 8 guys outside of the second half of game 4. So even with the Lakers playing a similar amount of guys, maybe their bench shouldn't play as much in the aggregate as Minnesota's, but the Lakers were gassed at the end of a lot of these fourth quarters. So from a team perspective, I think there's a lot of merit with what JJ said. Now, of course, because things work the way they work, a lot of people took this as a subtle to not so subtle shot at Luka, and I understand it. I can see why people are looking at it that way, and maybe it was to some degree. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm not ruling that out. I think JJ and Luka have a really good relationship, and I don't think that JJ would play that game. I think JJ is pretty direct, and as we've seen at times, like he has called out guys. He has said when guys don't play well, he said what guys need to do better. So I would say if that was JJ playing some type of game in terms of trying to poke at Luka or passive aggressively call him out, like that's just not really how JJ has operated this season. I know some coaches do that. That's not really how JJ has moved, and especially when Luka has an extension coming up in 3 months, I don't know that he would want to potentially alienate the 26-year-old superstar that is the face of the franchise and the future of the franchise. But of course, we know with Luka, he can be in better shape. He needs to work on his conditioning, and that was the big thing coming out of Dallas. And so again, I think because JJ preceded that by saying some guys were in, or he followed it up and then he made another comment again about championship shape. And he said some guys were in phenomenal shape. Some guys need to be in better shape. And I don't know how big each one of those groups is if we're looking at like a Venn diagram, but I would assume Luka's in the needs to be in better shape group. I don't think it's just Luka. I'm not going to get into the who needs to be in better shape and whatnot, but I think if you watch the games, there was clearly another guy or two, at least, if not several, that could have been in better shape. And I also think maybe this is just me getting a little deep here, but I think championship shape is not just about being in physical shape. I think that's a big element. And again, the Lakers were not in as good a physical shape as Minnesota. And despite being in the first round, when you have more time in between games, and like that would theoretically give the Lakers an advantage compared to later in the playoffs, they were not in the physical shape they needed to be in. But I would also argue the Lakers were not in the emotional and mental shape that they needed to be in. And if you look at the way that they approach being down 3-1 and the lack of urgency that they started game 5 with, outside of maybe Rui, and I would say like a couple drives from Austin, and even the way that they started game 1, there was some concerning just trends and tendencies within this series of just like a lack of urgency from this group. So that's not to point fingers at anybody. It's not to assign the blame to anybody, but I think collectively they weren't in the physical shape that they needed to be in. But I would also contend they were not in the mental or emotional space that they needed to be in. And I think you need to be in all three, because during the playoffs, you're going to face adversity. And I don't think this group was fully there in terms of the mental side, in terms of the emotional side. I think game 4 took a lot out of them. And some of the guys in game 5, you could just kind of tell by the body language, by the vibe, like they did not fully believe that they could win that game or that they were going to win that game and extend the series. So I know that championship shape for a lot of people is going to just mean physical. And I agree that they need to be in better physical shape. And that includes Luka. But I think it goes beyond that. I think there's a physical championship shape and state. And I also think there's a mental and emotional. I think the Lakers got to work on that too, because I don't think they were in the right space or state in the playoffs for whatever reason. And it was weird because going into the playoffs, they were in, I thought, a great space, a great state. They were rolling. They were looking like themselves. The offense was starting to hit its ceiling. The defense was coming back. They had the OKC win and then almost win before Luka gets ejected. They had the Memphis win, the Houston win, the Dallas win. Like things were rolling, and then all of a sudden, different vibe in the playoffs. And I'm not sure why. And I think they're going to have to figure out that during the offseason. But those are the three things. Again, Lakers brass still believes in the core of Luka, LeBron, and Austin. Offseason goals, particularly adding a center and more perimeter defense. And then the Lakers need to get in championship shape, which can be taken as purely physical shape, but to me also means mental and emotional. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Glenn. Thank you for the super chat. AR plus DK plus 31 or 32. First for Herb, Misi, and Bruce Brown Jr. That's a really interesting one. I think if we are evaluating it on pure value, I wonder if New Orleans would even consider that. I would say for the Lakers, I think the bar to trade Austin is going to be really high, in part because he's a fan favorite, in part because he's an ownership and front office favorite, and he's a homegrown star. So I think if we're evaluating this just from like an objective basketball fit perspective, I see why the Lakers would be interested in that. I don't see it as clearly on the New Orleans side, because you still have CJ McCollum, you still have DeJounte. You got to figure out what you're going to do there with that backcourt, and no one really wants to take on CJ. So I think, and maybe New Orleans is just kind of in a state where they want to get more talent, but I think, well, I'm really high on Herb. I don't know how high the Lakers are on Herb, and I think they would aim for someone even better if they were to trade Austin. I think they'd want more of a name, personally. Tai, thank you for the super chat. Given our assets and cap space, moves look minimal. I would agree. Now, the one thing that Rob said that I found interesting was that he expects a lot of moves this offseason around the league, a lot of activity. And one of the things that happens when there's a lot of activity is, like, just think about the Milwaukee Bucks situation with the Dame trade and having to trade Drew Holiday, and he goes to Portland, and then he gets rerouted to Boston, and all of a sudden Boston gets gift wrapped a fifth high-level player to add to their starting group, and all of a sudden they become this juggernaut, right? So you never know how if there's a Kevin Durant trade, if there's a Giannis trade, if there's a Ja Morant trade, if there's a Zion trade, you don't know how those trades could have ripple effects in terms of the whatever team is taking those guys on, them all of a sudden having a certain log jam or having to shake loose guys within their roster, the teams that are trading away the stars potentially now doing a fire sale to ship guys out. So there are a lot of potential ripple effects in terms of other big moves, and those tend to have domino effects that and sometimes it's as simple as like, it's star X is gonna go to either team A or team B, and if he goes to team A, now all of a sudden team B, like, they're looking at the market, they don't like anybody in free agency, they don't like anybody else on the trade market, and they're kind of like, well, all right, we're just going to pivot and we're going to rebuild. And now we're going to trade this guy and this guy and this guy's available. And all of a sudden Lakers or other teams that are looking to contend will have more options. So sometimes the picture is not as clear today on May 1st as it's going to be on June 1st or July 1st or even August 1st. These things are fluid. These things change all the time. And so I think right now, certainly, especially with the free, like if the Lakers, if their goal is to solve all their issues in free agency, then yes, that it's a very narrow path because they're going to have a $5.7 million taxpayer MLE and they're going to have a bunch of vet minimum contracts. So you're not, ideally you find someone of value for that 5.7, but then everyone else is vet minimum. And there's only so much you can do with vet minimum contracts. So that's where, like, they to really upgrade this roster, they're going to have to make a trade, if not a couple. And what that looks like, who that features, what assets are in that, I think it's too early to be determined. But certainly depending on how some of these situations shake out in terms of what stars or high-level starters, role players get moved, there will be ripple effects from that, and that will impact the Lakers and which guys become available. And sometimes it's even like, again, kind of bringing it back to that example of star X is going to team A or B. Maybe it goes to team A and then team B goes and like poaches someone from, they make another trade to replace someone. And then all of a sudden a free agent, like their former team is no longer interested in signing them. And now all of a sudden they're available. They don't have much of a market. Their price drops. And then all of a sudden it's a bargain contract. So there's lots of ways that this all can ripple, out, and it's kind of a game of musical chairs. So the Lakers are not going to be necessarily at the top of that list in terms of the big power players of the offseason, but they can take advantage of certain situations playing out potentially in their favor. So that's something to monitor moving forward. Sarah, thank you for the super chat. Did you expect this level of Luka backlash from fans and national media, and do you think it's fair? I did not expect this level of Luka backlash from fans and national media. I think I also didn't expect the Lakers to lose in round one. So I think there's a shocking element to it. And I also think for some people, there's an element of if they, like, let's say it's a national person and they pick the Lakers to win in 5 or 6, and obviously that did not happen, then it becomes like, well, who can we blame? Or like, how can I save face? And it's like, okay, well, why did the Lakers lose this? Okay, because Luka doesn't play defense and he's lazy and he's out of shape and this and that. And like, then they start throwing the blame out to justify their pick or to pivot. Like they want to be on the right side. So they pivot the right side of like now. So they pivot to attacking instead of critically thinking through some of these things. And I don't think it's fair. Now, I also think there's an element of like Luka and the Lakers got a lot of praise with the Luka trade, right? And for weeks and even months, it was like a victory lap. And not even like Luka and the Lakers necessarily inviting that. I think there was maybe a little bit of that in the beginning, but I think both of those parties moved on in terms of like, let's go win a championship. Like let's go play out the season. But the Luka trade and Nico Harrison and all the fallout from the situation has been talked about on a daily basis since February 1st. We are here on May 1st, 3 months later, 3 full months later, and we are still talking about the Luka trade and Nico Harrison and AD and Patrick Dumont and Mark Cuban and Rob Pelinka and the coffee shop in Dallas. And like, we're talking about all this stuff on a daily basis. And I've talked about like, it's a cash cow. It gets clicks, it gets views, it gets all that stuff. So that's why people continually talk about it. And that's why I think people hammer Luka, because if you hammer Luka, that's going to get a certain amount of attention. And now I think he is not above criticism and he is not above accountability. And I think I was honest last night. Like, I think he could be in better shape. We have physically seen him in better shape. I think last year he was in better shape. I think in previous seasons, like even seeing some of those highlights against him versus the Clippers in 2020 and 2021, like he was visibly slimmer and seemed to be in better shape. I think the defense has been better. I think the defense was better in the regular season compared to the playoffs. And I think it was better down the stretch in the regular season than it was in the playoffs. I think it's been better at times in Dallas. But I would say the defense and the conditioning are two obvious things that can be better. Now, at the same time, I think one thing that doesn't really get talked about, like at least I haven't really seen it get talked about a lot since last night, was like, dude got flagrant fouled and got his back thrown out, and he went back, got whatever treatment he needed, came back and gutted through it, and was still getting to his step back, was still beating Minnesota bigs off the dribble. Yes, he missed the layup late, but like he still was making a positive impact in the game. And in my opinion, on balance, was the Lakers' best player in the series. At least certainly was their best offensive player in the series. You look at the on-off numbers, especially offensively, a 26 point per 100 possession swing. They had an 85 offensive rating with Luka off the floor, which is like mind-boggling bad. With him on, it was 111, which is still not good, but much better than with him off. So I think the Luka flack, like it's like a pendulum right now, kind of swinging back and forth dramatically. And it post-Luka trade, it swung in his favor. It swung in the Lakers' favor. They're on that run, going 20-4. They're ascending up the West standings. They beat OKC. They have some of those big wins down the stretch. They have the Dallas game, and it's trending in a certain way. But then they fall flat in round one. And again, he's not blameless. Certainly, there are things he could have done better, and certainly some of his shortcomings and faults were a factor in LA losing round one. I'm not saying that, but I think people have been turning on him far too quickly, in my opinion, and I think it's something that. But look, it'll bear out, right? Like we'll see in 5 years where things are at. Did the Lakers win a championship? Like how did his career progress? What does that look like? But I think up to this point, he is still someone I'm betting on to be an all-time generational player. Ty, thank you for the super chat. Mainstream media doesn't watch the games. I mean, that's very true. Even with the Lakers out, keep up the content. Thank you. I will. And by the way, I was just watching Knicks, Pistons, and Clippers, Nuggets, and that Knicks Pistons game down the stretch was insane. Like for the record, I know Laker fans don't want to hear this necessarily right now, but aside from the Lakers losing in round one, this has been a great postseason. And I think the physicality, the defense, the high level execution in crunch time, the big shots, the big moments, like I think this has been an awesome first round, and we'll see how the rest of the playoffs progress. But like, I just think there's been a lot of great basketball. Jose, thank you for the super chat. What about Karis LeVert if LBJ takes a pay cut? I am on the record, and I don't want to speak too much on this because we have a story coming out tomorrow morning at The Athletic where we will be touching on some of this stuff. But I am very skeptical of LeBron taking a pay cut. And again, we will be touching on that with some of our reporting. But I don't know if Karis LeVert moves the needle enough. I also don't think he's good enough defensively. I think if the Lakers are going to bring in a perimeter wing type, I think it probably needs to be someone who's a bit better defensively. Like, to me, Karis LeVert would have some overlap with like Austin and with Luka. I don't think he's a guy who, like, he can play off the ball, but he is more of an on-ball type guy. So from a fit perspective, I have some questions about it, but from a LeBron taking a pay cut perspective in particular, I'm skeptical of that. Hey, Chinani, thank you for the super chat. I want to say a big thanks to you, TBH. I'm a diehard Kobe fan and follow Lakers because of him, so it hit me hard when he passed. Haven't watched much ball since he passed, but your show has helped bring back the love for the Lakers. Thank you. Well, thank you, Harry, and thank you for your support. Thank you for the consistent super chats, and that is touching. That means a lot to read that, and I'm glad I brought back the love for the Lakers, and I hope to keep it going. And thank you for the support and big things ahead, big things the rest of the offseason. I'm going to be going. I'm still figuring out my schedule, so I was going to say this at the end. I'll probably will say this at the end too, but we're going to take some few days off. I got my son coming out for his birthday. We're going to be celebrating this weekend, so off tomorrow, off Saturday and Sunday, but I'll be back Monday, and then I'll be doing 2 episodes a week and probably at least 1 live a week, if not 2 lives a week. Probably will fluctuate depending on the week, and got a wedding in Mexico in mid-May, so I'll be gone for about 5 days for that. So there'll be some times I'm out of town or whatever and maybe taking some breaks, but I'm trying to keep it as consistent as possible with 2 episodes a week, 1 solo, 1 with a guest, and then 1 to 2 lives a week. So that is the schedule for the foreseeable future. BLC, Jovan, always a blast watching your vlogs. Wish JJ just played Jax more since small ball wasn't working. Okay, but overall proud of the team, and next year will be better. Thank you, BLC, and thank you for your support throughout the season. I will be doing more vlogs. I've got a lot of content that's backed up, so I don't know if I'm going to post like old vlogs, but I might post some more generic of like in-depth kind of like what it's like to be on a road trip, and just some of my travel stuff and tendencies and whatnot. But in hindsight, yes, I think Jackson should have probably played in Game 5, but it's just didn't work out, and we'll see next season if he's on the roster or what that looks like. Bronny Van Exel, thank you for the super chat. I like LD, but be real, my guy Buha. He was not good versus Min this series. Averaged 9 of 22 field goals, 3 of 9 from 3, 6 assists to 4 turnovers in 5 games, and was a traffic cone on defense. I mean, I think I guess I didn't realize what his final numbers were in that sense. Let's see. So Luka's final numbers, I mean, he averaged 30 points a game. Like 30 points a game against that defense. I got to give the guy like a hat tip. Like, I think there's levels to this, and there are guys who, there's the old adage that like any player with given a certain amount of shots, a certain amount of usage can put up a certain amount of points, but like averaging 30 against one of the best defenses in the league with some of the best perimeter and interior defenders in the league, that's nothing to scoff at. 45% shooting, 35% on threes. Those are both like solid numbers. They're not like good, but they're not like bad either. Like 35% is a little bit under league average, 45% for a high usage scorer. That's in the mix for average, maybe a little bit below average. 9 free throw attempts per game, 89% shooting, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. Now 4 turnovers, 1 steal, and Lakers were outscored, obviously with him on the floor. So I mean, Luka could have been better. It was not his best basketball. That's not what I'm not saying that at all. I think I'm saying it again. Luka could be better, and Luka has been better, and I think Luka will be better. But I think sometimes the reaction is like if we're saying Luka is an utter disaster, averaging 30 points per game and 7 rebounds and 6 assists, like I would like to see what he looks like when he's average. That's all I'm saying. Like those are not, and numbers aren't everything. But again, the on-off was there. The Lakers were much worse with Luka off the floor, particularly offensively. And Now there's a reason why they lost 4-1, and he was a part of that. So I'm not saying that, but it's not like the guy averaged 10 points a game on like 30% shooting. He was pretty close to his regular season numbers. Just a bit of a dip in efficiency. Madison says, y'all need to stop pointing fingers. Blame goes to many parties. I would agree with that. Like, and look, I get it. And I think there have been times when, not to rehash old situations, but I think there were times where there maybe was more of a scapegoat or more of a party that, I'm not going to name the names. I think you guys know the names, but I don't view this as black and white as some of those times. Like, I think Luka could have been better. I think LeBron could have been more assertive offensively at times. I think Austin certainly could have been better. I think JJ could have been better with how he handled certain things and also how he handled the criticism of certain things and not letting that affect him. I think Jackson could have been better. I think DFS and Gabe could have made more shots, right? But that's kind of you can't really, it's not really a controllable is whether you make shots or not, right? It's more of a process thing. So certainly, like, I mean, I just named like half the rotation and the coach. And that's why the Lakers lost in 5 games. But it's and look, and I still contend, and I said this last night, and I will continue to say this. I think my biggest takeaway from this series was like the Lakers roster just wasn't good enough. So if I'm not going to do a blame pie, but if I was doing a blame pie, my biggest slice would be the roster and not having a playable playoff center and not having enough two-way depth. I think just those two factors alone were I think the Lakers, Minnesota was an especially tough matchup based on the Lakers' weaknesses. But I think even if they played like a Houston, who I view as like a worse Minnesota, that could have ended up being like a 7-game war potentially. Or like, I think there was some lesser teams on paper that had the Lakers played, it still probably would have been more of a slugfest because of some of their roster deficiencies. So I actually put the roster as the biggest thing. Then we could get into the coaching or the players and their performances. But like, I think there was, to me, once we saw what this group looked like in a playoff setting, the ceiling was much lower than I thought. And that to me was pretty concerning, but I largely blame that on not having a center and not having much two-way depth. Kiki, thank you for the super chat. Love your content. Buha, Buha. Got some trade targets. Wiggins, Herb Jones, KCP, Wings. Would you do AR for Herb? So that seems to be the big one going around Laker land right now in terms of fan trades. I like Herb. I think you would have to consider it. I honestly think both sides would probably want more from the other one, and both sides could make an argument. Two totally different players, obviously, in terms of skill set. And I think Herb would fit great next to Luka, and that's like the type of guy you would want next to Luka. I think the AR fit in New Orleans, it depends which way they're trying to go, but like they already have DeJounte and CJ, so I could see that kind of being just a little bit of like, they're not really contending or competing right now. They're a bit of a mess, but maybe you just say like you think AR is better than Herb or has higher upside than Herb, whatever. In terms of the other ones, I like AR for KCP, AR for Wiggins. I mean, that's not a conversation in either one. I assume you're talking about Andrew Wiggins, not Aaron Wiggins. I mean, that's maybe more of a Rui or like Gabe plus something conversation in terms of like matching contracts. I think I would take Rui over this version of KCP. KCP, I think, had a bit of a down year. Even Wiggins, factoring in the contract, I think I would rather just have Rui on his money, to be honest. Regardless of me, whatever I think about AR for Herb, I tentatively don't think the Lakers would do that. I would say. I think that their bar for trading Austin's really, really high. I continue to say that. Mirage, 1015 or 1015. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, Jovan, any concern with Reaves being the tertiary ball handler when Braun and Luka are on the court? Just feels like he's not being used properly. I think that's why fans want him traded, the fit aspect. So I've been thinking about this, and I think there is something to when you have certain duplicates on a roster, there can be a limitation there. Like I think, for example, pre-Luka trade, Austin and D'Lo were a bit of a duplication. And I think when there's a bit of a duplication, you default to the better player and favoring them. And you know, going back like over a decade ago, now like 15 years ago or whatever it was, Steph Curry and Monte Ellis. There was some duplication there, and it was like, okay, well, what are these guys? I mean, one of them became Steph Curry. One of them was Monte Ellis. No shade to him, but like he's not Steph Curry. And sometimes you got to make that tough decision of prioritizing or keeping the better player over, and then making a different decision with the other player. And looking at this roster, I think the two sets of duplicates I see that make things a bit tricky are, I look at Austin and Luka, and both being at the best with their ball, the ball in their hands. Both can play off ball. Obviously, Austin is used to more playing off the ball. Like that was how he started in the NBA. He's done that next to LeBron, next to AD, even next to Russ, next to D'Lo. Like he's gone through various iterations of playing more off the ball. So I think Austin could do it. But as we saw in this series, it's not always the cleanest fit. And I still think there's an element of him having the ball in his hands, being at his best. And then the other one I think about is just like Rui and LeBron. And I think Rui had a great series. So it's not a knock on Rui. I actually think he fits really well within the Lakers' small lineups. But if we are looking at the Lakers' front court and we are saying, like, even take out, because I know people want Austin to be a six man and this and that. Like, I just don't see that happening. I think the Lakers view him as a future all-star level player and a legit number 3. But let's just, for argument's sake, put Austin to the side. You have Luka and you have LeBron in your starting lineup. You're going to have a starting center that, based on what they want to put around Luka, is probably going to be some type of vertical lob threat rim protector, right? So you have that center, you have LeBron, you have spot X open in the front court and spot Y open in the back court. What types of players do you want? And I think ideally, especially when looking at like LeBron's going to be 41 next year, year 23. No players ever played in a 23rd season. It's going to be hard for him to keep up the defensive intensity that he played with this season. And even then, like there was some time, like I think early in the season, the defense wasn't as good. And then maybe at certain points later in the season, it wasn't up to his normal level. So like that's going to be hard for him to maintain over 80 games or 70 games, 60 games. Luka, we know, even when he's at his peak physically, is not like a great defender or necessarily even a good defender. So there's certain limitations baked in there that when you're looking at putting potentially Rui and Austin as the other front court guy and as the other backcourt guy, ideally you want a better backcourt defender than Austin. And ideally, you want a better wing defender than Rui. And Rui is a 4. Rui is not a 3. And Rui, to his credit, has played out of position on both sides of the ledger, where the Lakers have played him down at the 3 and put him on, like, Rui's guarded Ant at times this series, right? He also guarded Julius. And he also guarded Rudy. The Rudy keeps messing me up. But like Rui talked about last night, the challenge of having to face guard and box out and then go collect the rebound against a 7'2" guy in the paint. So point being, like, I like, you kind of want Rui offensively with like Vando's defense. And now that player together would be like a $30+ million player. That's a tough player to find. DFS, obviously I was advocating for him starting much earlier in the season, but I think defensively we saw some of the limitations with him. He's better against bigs than he is against quicker players. And then also the offensive end kind of slipped for him later in the season. And then looking at the backcourt, it's like a guy like Gabe's actually much more of a natural fit next to Luka than, let's say, like Austin, just because of the defensive side. Or I think Max Christie would have been a great fit. So it's not about like who's better or like obviously from a just starting your best players, starting your best lineup, it's clearly Rui and Austin. But in terms of ideal fit for what the Lakers need, like you're going to have a certain level of offense just with Luka and LeBron. You add in a rim running vertical lob threat. That's an offense unto itself, just Luka and that player playing pick and roll. Then you also have LeBron. But then ideally, those other two guys are like one big wing who can defend multiple positions at a high level, honestly, a Jaden McDaniels type. And then another guy who's probably more of like a Nickeil Alexander-Walker type or a Dante DiVincenzo type. And you have those two guys next to Luka, LeBron, and a center. And like that is a more coherent, balanced two-way lineup. So when looking at like some of the Lakers roster decisions, that's stuff that I think they have to weigh of just like how that all fits together. But what I think is going to happen is I think it's going to continue to be Luka, AR, and LeBron. And then the challenge is getting that center, making sure that center's a certain level defensively, and then making sure that wing, whoever that other starting, and maybe it's Rui, and they put a lot of defensive pressure on that big. But I think like they're going to need to drastically, in my opinion, improve at least two of the starting spots defensively. And maybe one of those, again, comes with the center, but then whether it's Rui or Austin, and I'm guessing Rui is more likely between the two. And it doesn't mean Rui's not on the team, to be clear. Like he could just be coming off the bench potentially. They're going to need to upgrade that, because if they just run it back with the same starters and like a better center, I think there's still too many defensive holes in that starting group. But we shall see. So in terms of, I actually think Austin took the number 2 role at points during the end of the season, and LeBron was actually more the guy who was playing off the ball. Obviously not like in the playoffs, it went the way I thought it would, which was LeBron was more the number 2, Austin was more the number 3. But certainly there is like, I think he should, the optimal use of him is having the ball more in his hands. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out. And JJ talked about it today, that he wants a full offseason and training camp and preseason to figure this out with those 3 players. And I think that's going to be, from a tactical perspective, like the most important thing for them. But there is certainly a defensive limitation just with those 3 altogether. Brad V, thank you for the super chat. Lakers were built for AD, Mavs for Luka, need pieces. Good point. Very good point. And that's another thing I've been thinking of. Like the Lakers were built for funneling to AD and playing through AD. And I would still contend they needed a better backup center and a little bit more size. But Lakers were more built for AD, and the Mavs were more built for Luka. Like that's why once they traded Luka, they didn't have another point guard once Kyrie went down. Missy G, thank you for the super sticker. Vector, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Jovan. In a pure draft compensation perspective, how much do you think Austin is worth? I'm not in the must-trade Austin camp, by the way. It's a good question. I'm not sure, because I don't know. Because the other thing is, like, he does have 1 year left on his deal, and then you are going to have to pay him. And I think if things go the way they're probably going to go, he is going to command north of 30 plus million annually. So that is a factor for anybody. It's tough. It is tough to place like a pure compensation on a player. I guess if I'm trying to like reverse engineer this, if the Lakers said Austin's available, Austin's on the trade block, I would assume they'd want a good young player in like 2 firsts. So maybe somewhere in that range. That could be low, that could be high. That's just me taking a swing. But because I also think about like some of the other, like for example, Walker Kessler, who I think Austin's a better player than Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler's still in his rookie scale deal, so he's a better value from that just pure contract perspective. But Utah's been adamant they want 2 firsts for him. Now they have not gotten 2 firsts for him, but like I think Austin's at a higher level, and so I think a intriguing young player and a couple picks is probably like close to his pure worth. But I think for the Lakers internally, his worth is very, very high. BLC. We started it with FU, but I don't think you meant FU. I think you meant if you were to guess now, what would the roster look like next year? It's just so hard to make this guess, especially because sometimes I'll get aggregated on this stuff and then it'll come back to bite me. I'm not sure. I think it would probably be largely running it back. Maybe if they make a deal, it's probably something like Gabe and Kleba, maybe Gabe, Kleba, Dalton, and a first for something, and they could get into that. Like, could you get Nick Claxton with that? Maybe you throw in a couple, two swaps, because I don't think Gabe, Kleba, and Dalton is really moving the needle much, to be honest. And even the Lakers first might not be worth much depending on where they're at in like 2031 or 2032. So could you throw that together for Nick Claxton? Could you throw that for another wing, and then maybe you sign a big with, you get a discount with someone taking the taxpayer MLE. So I could see something like, could you trade for Nick Claxton, then sign a wing, the best wing you could get for 5.7. It's probably a bench wing. And then you go into next year with Nick Claxton, LeBron, Rui, Austin, Luka. Bench is DFS. You do have a hole there at backup guard, but DFS, Vando, Jordan Goodwin, free agent wing X, and like Jackson as like the backup, maybe something like that. But I think it's too early to tell, and I would not be surprised if I'm wildly off with that. But I do appreciate the question. Miguel, Gabe for Thibault, AR for Jonathan Isaac. I like the thinking behind what you're saying. I think Gabe for Thibault is really interesting. I'm pulling up Thibault's season because admittedly I do not know Matisse Thybulle stats off the top of my head. Shot 44% on threes this year, career high, 3.2 attempts per game. He is a big athletic defender. I do not think the Lakers would do AR for Jonathan Isaac. And Isaac, I think aside from like the name situation or like lack of name recognition, which I don't think should be a fact. Like, he's coming off playing 71 games, but he has an extensive injury history where, looking at the previous 5 seasons, it was 34 games, missed 2 full seasons, then played 11 games, then 58 games. So he's also not a beacon of health. I think that is a factor for the Lakers when evaluating players, is health track record. So I don't think they would do that. But I understand why you're suggesting it. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. We all know Braun can't be replaced as a superstar and box office material unless KD or Giannis trade, but Braun won't leave because of no trade clause. Excuse me, I needed a quick water break. I'm not sure what you're getting at here. in terms of trading, I think you might be getting at like potentially trading LeBron or why it won't happen. And I agree. I think that there's certainly a superstar box office element to it. He does have the no trade clause, and he could sign just another 1+1 and continue to maintain that no trade clause if he does opt out. But yeah, I don't think the Lakers would trade him unless he wanted to be traded. That would be my read on that. Stephanopoulos, thank you for the super chat. Was all for trading AR, but after calming my tits, he's just too good. Lediscow, MLE, a trade plus some valuable minimum players who want to play with Luka. Yeah, I mean, look, I understand the fan frustration with AR, and I know by nature, look, I've been doing this show for 14 months. I know that AR is like, for whatever reason, the most polarizing player on the team, and anytime he has a bad game, he gets a lot of flack, and there's been stretches he's had good games, and fans have been happy with him, but I understand the dynamic with him. Again, I want to temper expectations with LeBron taking a pay cut. Maybe he proves me wrong and does it. And like I could see a slight pay, like last year he took a $2.7 million pay cut to keep the Lakers under the second apron. I could see something like that. But in terms of the big like $15-20 million pay cut, I'm personally very skeptical that happens, and I will have some more reporting on that coming out. But yes, I think in general, adding an MLE guy, probably a taxpayer, trade value minimums, like that's probably the way to go. Like, look, not to rehash old stuff, but like look at the impact that Gary Trent Jr. had for the Bucks. Like that is the type of minimum signing the Lakers need to try to hit on. They could have hit on it had they had an open roster spot. That was something I reported on before the season. Gary Trent, like there would have been some interest there had the Lakers had a spot. They didn't. They instead had Cam Reddish and Christian Wood on the roster, but you know. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Braun's $50 million will destroy the Lakers long term. Without Braun not opting out, there's just no way to get a young superstar next to Luka for the next decade. I don't know that. I don't think it'll destroy them long term, but I think the probably the most optimal thing for the Lakers would be LeBron just playing a one more year and them getting the opportunity to reset in 2026. Now, if LeBron continues to play at an all-NBA level, that's a different conversation, because I actually think he's been playing like that type of player. It's just obviously from a roster construction perspective, when you have multiple like a couple max guys and then Austin's due for a payday, like all of a sudden the money starts to run out. But I mean, like in an ideal world, sure, LeBron takes a pay cut and that helps the Lakers improve the roster. I think it's easier to say that than to actually apply that in reality. Keon Park again, either Braun or need to trade AR, Rui, DFS, Gabe, and or Vando. So you're saying either need to trade LeBron or basically the entire supporting cast. I assuming you don't mean all of them, but like some of them. I think certainly possibilities there in terms of some of those guys getting traded, or at least one of those guys getting traded. Like the Lakers are going to have to. I always say you got to give something up to get something. You don't just get something for free. Even Luka, Lakers gave up AD, Max Christie in a first. It might have been less than Luka was worth, but you always got to give something up. So I suspect if the Lakers make a high impact trade, they will have to give up at least one or two of those guys. Stephanopoulos, do Gabe, Rui, and Maxey gain value for being expirings? Yes. I still think that the jury's out on Maxey. Like he played one game post injury, so I think he's a bit of a wild card or mystery box in terms of his value. But as in a guy who was coming off a rough shooting season, had a major injury, is in his early 30s. Like I don't think that's like peak trade value. I think Rui this year at this point this season has a much higher trade value than he had last season, coming off of that Denver first round series where I thought he really struggled. He was awesome in the first round against Minnesota. He was awesome this season. Lakers' fourth best player. So I think he's become at least neutral, if not positive value in a lot of people's eyes. I think he should be a positive value, but there are still, I think, some Rui skeptics, at least when I talk to people at games. Gabe, I think, is much with the injury history and some of the inconsistent shooting. I think is more of like a slight negative value. Please don't aggregate this. Anytime I talk about player trade value, I immediately get aggravated. That's the thing. I get aggravated and aggregated. So please, Bleacher Report and Legion Hoops and all of you, please do not aggregate this. I feel like they search when I say aggregate and then they go to that part. Bronny Van Exel, thank you for the super chat. Free agent centers, Miles Turner, possible backups, Loon and Thomas Bryant. Miles Turner, I do not see being possible because the most realistically the Lakers could get to is like 12.9, which would be the non-taxpayer MLE, but that would hard cap you at the first apron. So they would have to do some cap gymnastics just to stay under that. And that's like him taking, like I was hearing, this is around the trade deadline. I was hearing he wanted like 30 plus million. I don't think he's going to get 30 plus million, but he should probably be able to get at least 15 plus, maybe 20 plus million. So I think that's a pretty steep discount for Miles Turner, and Indiana's now in the conference semifinals. They made the conference finals last year. I think they're going to try to keep that rolling and try to keep him. In terms of Looney versus Thomas Bryant is a former Laker. Between those two, I would prefer Kevon Looney, just the championship pedigree and experience with the Warriors. I would aim a little bit higher, to be completely honest, in terms of backup bigs, but I mean, I would consider them, but like, to be honest, I'd rather have Jackson than either one of those two. But Jackson in a backup role, not as a starter. Neutro AR for Kamara. Is that even possible? Is it possible? I don't think the Lakers would do that. I don't know about the Blazers side. I don't know if it's possible off the top of my head in terms of contracts, but I know Portland's very high on Kamara. I really like him. I mean, he is kind of in that Herb Jones mold. Believe he's a little bit younger. It's an interesting one, but I don't think the Lakers do it. JP, thank you for the super chat. Need to look to sign players from whoever wins the chip this year. We had championship veterans in 2019-20. That's a good observation, and I agree. I think players who have played in winning environments and shown they can contribute on the highest level, those are the types of guys you want in your locker room. Whether it's like a Markieff Morris, who had already done it with the Lakers, had been in the finals last year with Dallas, or just from like that leadership experience perspective, or like Rondo, JaVale, like those types of guys. I think those are the types of guys you want. Fahim, if you break down prospective additions in a story, can you rate them as a 16-game player? It's one thing to add regular season players, D'Lo, etc., but another to sign dudes that can legit elevate in the playoffs. Yeah, I like that. I mean, why not just do it in a video? I could do it in a video. I'll be bringing you guys plenty of off-season content in terms of potential signings and update, reports and all that stuff. So I can certainly do that when I do a free agent breakdown. Brett, thank you for the super chat. As a Wolves fan, enjoyed listening to your perspective through the series. We've been on the other end of having to rely on Vando, and that's a dicey bet. LOL. Thank you, Brett. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the Wolves fans who've been tuning in and have been nice to me relatively, most of you. So I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I mean, look, like I thought Vando made a big impact in Game 5, and obviously on the defensive side, I have no questions about it. It really just comes down to the offensive end, the way you use him, the spacing, his catching, his finishing, his shooting. there's a lot of variables that go into how effective he is on the offensive end, and also there's his health and the health, the injury history. Lakers 702. Thank you for super chat. Thoughts on acquiring Claxton via trade? I love it. I would say off the top of my head, like Claxton to me is probably the best case scenario center for the Lakers this summer. Like I can't think of a better one that's like also semi-realistic. Again, like if they could get Walker Kessler, sure. I love Walker Kessler. You guys know that. But Claxton to me is someone that, depending on the way that Brooklyn goes, if he's available, I would make an aggressive offer. And I think he would fit with Luka as a pick and roll lob threat. He'd also fit as a versatile, switchable, rim protecting big. So he checks basically all the boxes. Oida boy, thank you for the super chat. Trade Bronny for cash considerations and send Braun a send Braun a message. You are ruthless, man. Lakers are not going to do that, but that would be a message for sure. And yeah, I mean, you might as well just let LeBron walk at that point. Golden, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Smart as a point of attack defender for Gabe plus Maxey and seconds? Let's look at Marcus Smart's season. He's on the Wizards after being traded there. Shooting bounce back in Washington. He's 30, so he's not over the hill yet, but he is on the wrong side of the aging curve. How many more years does he have on his contract? Let's see. Sorry, I know this is riveting stuff right now. He's got one more year left, so he's also an expiring $21.6 million. So Lakers will actually be saving some money by trading out Gaby. I just combined their names, Gabe and Maxey. I'd consider it. I think Marcus is better than Gabe. If he had an extra year of the contract, I probably wouldn't want to touch it, but I like that he's bigger, he's stronger. He's actually 31. I don't know why basketball reference with the age stuff sometimes messes with my head. This is I like Yobani, relatively similar to my name. Yobani 96. Thank you for the super chat. Why is LeBron so hard to lock down for an interview? Surprised why he wouldn't do an interview with you or Lakers Nation. It's a good question. I think at this point, I mean, I understand some of LeBron's anti-media stuff. I think no one has been covered as critically or harshly as him. He came up right at the sweet spot. I mean, he even preceded most of social media, like Facebook before it popped, and Twitter and Instagram, YouTube. But then he came up right before that era, and then he was ascending during that era. And then there was the decision and all the stuff that has transpired throughout his career, and the finals criticism and the comparisons with Jordan. And I just think, I kind of think in a way he's like he's the biggest U.S. athlete right now. One of the biggest U.S. athletes of all time. Like I guess he just doesn't like have to. I would love. I mean, open invitation for LeBron to come on Buha's block at any point and chop it up, and I would love that. But I think he's almost too big to do it. So it's unfortunate, but maybe one day, maybe we'll get Bronny at some point. That would be fun. But I'm going to wrap here. I went a little bit longer than anticipated. I said 45 and I went an hour 8. You guys know how I do. But as a reminder, I will be back on Monday. I'm going to be taking the next few days off, spending time with my son for his birthday. So I will be a bit off the grid. It will be nice to have a bit of a break. But We'll be back next week with 2 episodes, at least 1 live, if not a couple. So going to continue churning out the content. We'll probably be posting on Sunday a mailbag prompt under the community post tab on my YouTube page. So be on the lookout for that. And if you guys have a mailbag question, I will answer. I'll probably do, honestly, 2 mailbag episodes next week. I typically get enough questions to fill out at least 2 episodes. But appreciate you all for rocking with me. Appreciate you all for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, like this video, like it right now if you've not done so yet, and drop a comment. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. Again, I'll be back on Monday. I will talk to you all then.